Hey guys, Dr. Dave here. Today we're talking about hip flexors and its impact on your spine and why it's so important that we stretch it out. A lot of you sometimes get pain here in the hip or more. What's more interesting about hip flexors, it actually starts in the hip, but those muscles, powerful muscles, actually attach to your pelvis and your low back. So it literally is what's contracted when you sit. So if you think about it, the hip flexors are always shortening when you're sitting. And if you sit for a living, which is what many of you do, it's one of the reasons why those hip flexors get tight. And you don't realize it's actually what's causing your back pain, your hip pain, all kinds of issues. And if you have a hip issue on one side more than the other, it's causing rotation to your pelvis. So today we're going to talk about that. So one of the ways that we like to stretch out the hip flexors, and one of the reasons I love having this group now, is I'm able to start showing you, everybody, all the stretches that I always wanted you to know. So I'm a little bit off camera here, I apologize, but let me show what we're trying to do. In the hip, so all you need to see is my hip anyway. When we stretch out the hip, I do it as a lunge stretch. So in this position, notice my hip, right? Notice the line of my stomach and my hip is all along here, right? So if I'm gonna do a lunge, many of you might lunge forward, but notice my hand is where my hip flexor is. That's not even moving at all, right? What I wanna do is I wanna stretch the hip flexor. I wanna drive the hip forward and actually bow in this area where now look at the line, I'm getting some tension here, right? So what I'm doing from the lateral view is I'm just coming straight forward and I'm driving the hip flexor forward and I'm stretching, okay? Some of you may want to put your arms overhead, and I'll show you this in the position in a second, but now we're really stretching that hip flexor, and some of us, you may even put in some rotation away and you'll see that stretch out. So that's a great way to stretch the hip flexor. Okay, one of the great ways to do that. But today we're going to show you how to mobilize it with some of the balls that we have. Now, if you should have the Move Well kit. Move Well kit comes with a double lacrosse ball. This we could use in there. Sometimes if you may not have that with you right now, you may carry just a regular lacrosse ball. I like to use a softball to it gets in a little bit deeper. So a little bit about these devices, right? The smaller the ball, right? The smaller the surface area, right? The surface contact, which means that that smaller area is gonna actually be a sharper, more stylus type of motion, where a bigger, broader ball like this is gonna have a little bit less of that pressure, right? Smaller the surface area, the less pressure, remember from physics class, right? So the thing is this, the reason I would use a softball, if you're a little bigger, is because you're gonna get a little deeper penetration, okay? So remember, if you saw the Facebook Live, if you're actually watching this in time, you saw how we compressed those pencils, right? And we kind of broke them up this way. So let me show you how we do that. I'm going to use the softball today. Okay, you can use any one of those devices. What you're going to do is you take the ball and you're going to put it, if you look at your hip, right, there's a bone here, right? So just medial to the bone or just on the inside of that bone, I want you to lay right on that ball. And as I lay on that ball, I want you just to relax. So as I'm relaxing, right, so what happens is this. When you go in and you start to work on some of the tight muscles that are there, what's going to happen is the muscles themselves are guarding and protecting you. So it's going to be tight, it's going to be stiff. Now, if you've watched some of the other videos before, there's no muscles in your body that should be tight or stiff, okay? So when you find those areas, right, and I'm kind of going laterally, kind of grinding laterally across the hip flexor, finding the tightest, most tender, most stiff part, okay? When I find it, I want to hang out there, okay? If you try to go and grind it right away, what'll happen is the muscle's never going to relax. It's going to hurt. Your body's going to protect itself, and the whole purpose is to get this to kind of relax and get some circulation in there. So I'd rather you just sit there and let the muscle relax around the ball, right? Once you get that point where that muscle lets you in, you can do a couple things, right? You can, like I said, laterally go back and forth or go across those fibers, right? Now you're really kind of mashing out across and crushing those fibers together, okay? Or you could, like I said, pin and stretch. So right now the muscle is more or less contracted. So when you bring the leg into extension, right, hip flexor goes forward. So when you bring it to extension, you're not allowing those adhesions to get through. So all you do now is now I'm just playing around. I can let that ball come out even further to the outside. I can work on the hip out there, right? Really go far on the outside. I can bring it back towards the middle. But really, I'm trying to be real focused on where am I really tight? And why is it so tight? Why is that fiber, that area so tight? Was it from my squatting? Is it from sitting all day? Is it from a lot of driving? Is it from an old injury of some sort? Is it from running? And is my pelvis imbalanced? Do I have to go to the chiropractor, get adjusted? These are the things you want to think about when you're starting to find some of these tight, tender muscles in there. So when you're done, right, I'm going to come back across the middle. When you're done and you actually stand up, you're going to really feel the difference. You'll feel the blood circulation coming back into that muscle, right? And then if you go and stretch out your hip flexor, right, you'll see much more mobility. I have much more mobility in my psoas and my hip flexor. So this is our first educational video on how to do some mobility or get beyond mobility using some of the devices that you have. Hey, if you don't have a softball, my best recommendation if you're going to get one for that deeper penetration, I might put a link on here below from Amazon. Don't get a leather one. Don't get a leather and lace one. Get a rubber. Get one that's more rubber, like a T-ball. You know what I mean? Like when they play T-ball, it's hard, but it's rubber. You want to avoid like this is leather and it's got laces, so it may not feel so great against your soft tissue. So try to get the rubber one doesn't have the real laces on there. So that's my best advice. I'll try to find an Amazon link and put it below for the ones that I get for that. So hey guys, hope you appreciate that. Start working on that hip flexor. Do both sides. See which sides are tighter and start realizing how important it is to get that to move right. And give us more posts and comments what other areas you want to work on. I can imagine there's tons that we can do, but if you give me an order of importance for you, we'll get that done, and we'll be all leveling up our lifestyle in no time. So guys, have a great day, and that's it for today for Beyond Mobility. Have a good one.